All right, so the rule of thirds, probably the most golden out of all the golden rules in photography and cinematography. But before photography and cinematography were even created, painters way back in the day, in the Renaissance time, when there was new kind of paintings and styles coming out, painters of that time wanted to create artwork that showcased more of the background, so that there was a conversation happening, so that the subject, when they used to paint, the subject would be centered. The most important part of the image would be in the center, kind of like, you know, when you're playing darts, right? You're aiming for that center point, whatever, the bullseye, the center of the frame. And they found that they could showcase more of the background and create more of this conversation by taking the character or subject out of the center and moving it along one of these intersecting lines in the frame. There are 9 equal blocks that you can divide each frame up into with 4 intersecting points. Placing your subject on one of these 4 intersecting points creates this much more dynamic communication or conversation really that can happen with the person viewing the artwork or photo or video or painting, and then the subject that is in that painting. Because when you have the subject in the center of the frame, as you can see, there's equal distance in all directions. So this tends to make the viewer's eye very static, not moving, no interaction. When you take this point of interest here and you move it off to one of these intersecting lines, what happens is it creates more of a dynamic image. It allows the eye to come into the frame, look at the viewer, look at the background, and have a communication, have a conversation there, make this energetic connection between viewer and art or photo or video, all these things. So this is one of those original rules, or really like concepts, not really a rule, it's a concept or a theory behind framing that allows for much more dynamic images to be created. So you can see with our lovely model Carissa, that when she's framed on one of these intersecting lines on the thirds, there's a much more dynamic communication going on here. The eye comes into the frame, analyzes it, sees the background, goes back into the subject, and so on. On the other hand, when she's centered in the frame, we don't have this dynamic conversation that's going back and forth. So in my films and in my photos and in all the stuff that I create, as a cinematographer, you have to have this in mind. Instead of putting the most important thing in the center of the frame, we have to see visually where we can pair this image up into that same frame, but in a much more dynamic way, so we're telling more of a story. Where you leave space in the frame allows for the viewer that's viewing that to go into that part of the frame and analyze or communicate. So if you can imagine, if you have a framed image and it's just the subject and there's nowhere for the viewer's eye to go, there's not going to be that much of a communication, there's not going to be that much thought. So the space that you create, whether it's a space above the subject, that's more room to think. If there's space below the subject, that's less room to think, but there's more to analyze down here. Same with left and right, up and down, forward and back, right? All of these ways are how we as cinematographers create a more dynamic story to tell. So as you can see, it's all about where the viewer's eyes are going. And by placing points of interest, whether that's a subject's face or an object of interest or the subject's eyes even, this is the strongest part of any film, is seeing the subject's eyes, because that's how people connect with each other. So you instantly open up that human-to-human connection and the emotional side. So by placing the subject's eyes, generally a good rule of thumb, and these aren't really rules, like I said, just a theory, but we're learning these theories and rules, and then later on we'll be able to break these for a desired effect. But it's generally most comfortable framing-wise to have the subject's eyes on this top third framing wise. If the subject eyes are centered in the frame, it's not very comfortable. And then if they're in the lowest third, it looks like some meerkat discovery situation.
These mammals belong to the mongoose family.
But Framing the subject and having their eyes always in mind is definitely key to creating that viewer to subject connection.